Have you ever wondered what it might be like to attend your own funeral? There is such a thing as a living funeral. This is sometimes known as a pre-funeral, and the person whose funeral it is very much alive. This may sound strange, and you might ask, why is it even a thing? But they've been around for at least 30 years. Yes, in the 90s, Japan's Saizensos, and sorry if I've butchered that word, or funeral while living took place so family and friends would have help organizing the funeral and alleviate this kind of pressure when the person died. And in 2019, South Korea held a 25,000 person mass living funeral so people could face their mortality and embrace living. This makes sense since in South Korea, the suicide rate has been steadily rising in younger people. So these living funerals were intended to help people appreciate life and know how much they would be missed by laying in the coffin, witnessing family attend, and playing dead. There are also other reasons for pre-funerals. Some people know they're dying and may wish to have a funeral for closure and to celebrate their life with their loved ones. And in this video, you'll learn about Martha, the beloved mother of one of my clients. Martha decided to have a living funeral, and with the permission of Martha and her daughter, my client, I can tell you why she chose to have one, what happened on the day, and since. This may give you some important realizations to consider for your own life. So Martha was in her mid-70s. She didn't have a terminal disease or any kind of terminal prognosis, but she was at a point in her life where she felt she was ready to move on from this life. Those are her words. You see, Martha had outlived both of her parents and had no living aunts or uncles. She believed she was lucky to have lived as long and as well as she had, and she had 4 children and 7 grandchildren who she loved dearly and who loved her. But Martha was at a point in her life when she felt content enough. She described it to her family as, quote, having eaten a delicious meal and feeling relaxed and satiated, not needing more, just wanting to close her eyes, sigh with contentment, and fall asleep. End quote. And when put that way, I kind of feel she was onto something, because Martha highlighted that natural death doesn't have to be a morbid and scary thing. It can be welcomed, the next adventure, as Jung called it. So I asked Martha's daughter, my client, how on earth Martha came to this conclusion, and she told me that for some time Martha had been thinking that she would be happy to leave this mortal realm. But she questioned herself. She wondered if there was something wrong with her. Am I suicidal, she thought, and because of this, she felt a bit ashamed. This was all in her journal, which she left to her children. But then one day it reads, Martha was watching a Star Trek episode. In the episode, the Enterprise visits an alien species in which elders are willingly euthanized at around the equivalent of 60 human years, whilst in good health. It struck her how they would perform ceremonies and say goodbye with willingness and dignity, and it so resonated with her and validated her thoughts that she decided to finally share them with her children. And you wouldn't believe the ingenious way she did it. She got them all around as normal on a Saturday evening, and she played the Star Trek episode in the background as everyone was talking, pottering around, sharing quality time, food and drink. Honestly, the way her family was described in her journals showed me why she felt so content in her life, but also made me feel sad for her family. She was such a focal point for them, a wonderful matriarch. So anyway, Martha started to focus on the program, and the family started to comment. She noticed how it divided the room, and when she was asked what she thought, she told them her opinion and asked them how they would feel if she did that. They of course thought it was all hypothetical, but soon learned otherwise. Of course, Martha was clear she was not going to end her life, but that she would be fine if it were to happen naturally. She said she wanted to be able to say her goodbyes with love and togetherness and without regret. This is when she brought up the idea of the living funeral. She'd saw a documentary on it. At first, her children seemed stunned that she was willing to leave them behind. They felt hurt and seemed to take it very personally, which is understandable. But she assured them that hers was not a wish to die. It was a satisfaction and contentment of her life. It was a credit to them all. Slowly, they began to understand and see that Martha was indeed happy with her life and with them. So together over time, her family helped Martha book a venue, one that was similar to what they ended up arranging for Martha's actual funeral, and they created a guest list. This was quite difficult for them. My client told me how conflicted they all felt. On the one hand, they were being practical and organized, and some days it just felt like arranging a fun event for the family, strangely. But then they would be asked about the flowers Martha liked or the clothes she would wear, and they realized they hadn't even asked her. This also made them realize that Martha's idea was not the worst. They would be able to ask her rather than guess. So on the day, they also arranged to film it so that people could share their thoughts about losing Martha, and so Martha herself could share her thoughts about life and the next phase, and of course, messages to others. Practically, it helped everyone plan what Martha wanted for when her time really came, and this also took the pressure off her family because it was all arranged and organized together. This was also helpful emotionally because the family, although initially horrified and resistant at first, felt they were able to face something they all secretly dreaded, and they were able to share their feelings of love and sadness with Martha. This was very cathartic for them, and for Martha, she was able to hear the eulogies and learn what she meant to her family. It was fulfilling and celebratory. She felt such joy at what she had around her and grateful for the love and the ability to say goodbye in such a dignified way. She also felt sad too, because although she was ready for the new adventure, it hit her that she was bidding her final farewell to her family. But in good old Martha fashion, she told them she'd be watching over them always. Ultimately, Martha felt it was therapeutic for her, and so did her family. One of her children told Martha that, "I've feared losing you for so long. I always pushed those thoughts away, but facing it in this way has helped me see we're all scared." So let's talk about the day itself. On the day, Martha was bathed and dressed herself in her most comfortable and pretty outfit. She remembers keeping her eyes closed through the whole process, wanting to center herself. Martha was placed in the open casket that she'd purchased, well, not she, her family, for her actual funeral. It had been specially made for her. The funeral was attended by Martha's children and some of the older grandchildren, her siblings, and some friends. Martha recalls how after a little while, as things started to set in and her family and friends let themselves feel the gravity of the day, there were tears, and some people seemed inconsolable. Martha remembers feeling a shift in the atmosphere. It suddenly took on a heaviness, but she realized it was coming from them, not from her. Martha noticed in her there was a calm, but also a sadness. She wanted to comfort them and realized that she would not be able to when her time really came. Then the eulogies came. Her loved ones started talking about how they knew her, how they saw her, what she meant to them, and what they regretted. For instance, wishing they had spent more time together. Martha remembers finding this overwhelming. She was overcome by emotion, and her tears ran fast as she lay still, pooling on her face. Afterwards, Martha and her casket were led away and left in a side room. All attendees left to return to her house. Martha had asked for this separation. She wanted to feel the aloneness of death and wanted her family to as well. Martha later realized this was because she did feel lonely about dying. This experience and being alone helped Martha experience some comfort in her solitude. Martha recalls feeling a whole gamut of emotions and then a calm serenity. She needed this time alone to get there, and it felt so powerful. It was almost psychedelic, she wrote. This experience certainly offered Martha and her loved ones an experience they could never have envisioned, but they were ultimately grateful because it allowed them to feel one another in such a deep way. They wanted to make the most of the time they had together. Yes, Martha and her family and friends made more time for one another. Even though they spent time together every week, Martha noticed how now they would make sure that they could all visit no matter what. They also called her more during the week. Martha felt their ongoing love and was very fortunate. Her children told her that though they found it extremely difficult, it helped them face their future grief. And it did, because when Martha died peacefully in her sleep only 3 weeks later, her children were comforted by the knowledge that their mother welcomed death and had known their love ran deep, but also that they were able to make the most of their time with her when she was around. So we see how, as strange as living funerals may seem, it can be a beautiful thing if one is able to face it. It can help us appreciate our loved ones and life so we can make the most of them and it and gain closure with readiness and less fear about the new adventure.